Welcome to Robotics and Automation News webinars, where you can be part of a global event without leaving your home or office. Attend our live webinars and communicate directly with influential professionals in your industry.
Hello, my name is Abdul Montakim. I'm editor of Robotics and Automation News.com. In this interview, Fergal Glynn talks about Six River Systems, a warehouse automation company which has released a robot called Chuck. Six River Systems was started by former executives at Kiva Systems, a warehouse robotics company which was bought out by Amazon for $775 million in 2012. Six River Systems itself was founded in 2015.
Hi, hello, this is Fergal Glynn, and I'm the VP of Marketing at Six River Systems, and I'm responsible for right now helping the world to get to know a new way of doing warehouse automation that is powered by collaborative robots and artificial intelligence. And we make a collaborative robot who we call Chuck that helps to allows our customers to fulfill orders faster and more accurate in warehouses.
Okay, let's describe Chuck. As far as I know from the pictures I've seen, it's a small wheeled robot that autonomously goes around in a warehouse. And what does it do?
Yeah, so Chuck, it's a autonomous vehicle. In terms of its footprint, it's about the size of a large shopping trolley. That if you went to a large supermarket and picked one of those large trolleys, it's roughly about the same size as that. So Chuck helps with picking in the warehouse. And there's three main areas that Chuck and our software helps with. So the first thing, in the warehouse, about 70% of your cost is on your people. And then a lot of people say that about 70% of their people's time is spent walking around. So if you bring in Chuck, which is an autonomous vehicle, it's able to move around on its own without people. It's able to cut down on the walking by about half, simply by the fact that it's able to carry boxes and products kind of simply from A to B on its own in the warehouse. So that's one area of benefit. The second area of benefit is our artificial intelligence. And it's our algorithms that will look at all the work that needs to take place in a warehouse, group together orders that are in similar locations. So for the picker who's in the middle of the warehouse picking those products off of shelves, that their walking is reduced even further, where they do not have to keep walking up and down the same aisle all day. So for example, if there's a high priority order in aisle F, and we know we got to get that order out the door as soon as possible, so the Chuck will go over to that area. Well, while it's in that area, anything else that needs to be picked can be picked, because we know we have a person and we have a robot in that area. So let's also get everything else that surrounds it. So that will reduce the walking in the warehouse even further. And then the third area of benefit is we make picking faster. So we make picking faster because of the directed nature of the robot. So what I mean by the directed nature is that the picker in the warehouse will follow the robot. So the robot now, in essence, becomes the picker's GPS. It becomes their conveyance, and it also sets the pace at which the picker will actually travel, with which they will walk around the warehouse. And so that directed nature, this directed workflow, it will make it easier to find that exact right product on the shelf, and it also will confirm the accuracy of what was picked.
Right, and does Six River Systems develop or offer any other robots apart from Chuck?
So we're very focused on solving problems in the warehouse around fulfillment. And so Chuck is our first product. So Chuck is a mix of hardware and software. We have also released multiple other products that will supplement what Chuck is doing and also allow for different use cases in the warehouse. So for example, there are different sizes of Chuck that we have released. So we continuously customers ask for bigger robots. So we have built a bigger robot. Also, there are add-ons to Chuck where you can have different levels or different segmentations on how you store your containers on Chuck. Then we also, just this year, have released a product which we call Mobile Sort. So Mobile Sort is a product that allows an operator to batch pick items with Chuck into a tote, into a container, but then have that container go to this sort wall where now the box of batch picked items gets broken down into your discrete customer orders. So by using the robot Chuck and also the sort wall, it allows this type of flexible, collaborative fulfillment technology to be used by larger and larger warehouses.
Right, and how many warehouses at the moment, I guess percentage-wise perhaps, do not have automation like this, autonomous vehicles like this? I would imagine that it's more than half of all warehouses in, for example, the US where you're based, don't have autonomous vehicles. What's your understanding or finding? You've probably done some research on it.
Yeah, very good question. So based on so a mix of like independent analyst research, our own research, and then consuming publicly available reports, the estimate is there's 4,000 retail and third-party logistic warehouses in the US where people are pushing around manual carts in order to do the picking. And then we're actually also seeing in kind of the western part of Europe and the northern part of Europe that there's about 4,000 more warehouses there where people are pushing around manual carts. And so there's quite a lot without these collaborative robots.
And what do you think the opportunity is in terms of for a company like yours offering the kind of machine that you're offering, the autonomous vehicle? I mean, those 4,000 or whatever number it is, maybe not all of them really need autonomous vehicles. What kind of warehouse operation would most benefit perhaps from autonomous vehicles?
So I'll just I'll split that question into two answers. So the first would be what type of operation, how we look at the economics and how our customers look at the economics is if there are more than 6 people working an 8-hour shift, picking eaches or individual items, then the economics start to make sense by supplementing what they do with a collaborative robot that can double or triple their productivity. So kind of our rule of thumb is if you've got 6 or more pickers, and if you're picking products that are smaller and less weight than a microwave, that you should investigate this technology. And then in terms of the opportunity, so we're seeing in the supply chain where it has been very well set up for the movement and picking of pallets and cases in the warehouse that now with e-commerce, with omni-channel, with shrinking store sizes, there's now a requirement to get eaches or individual items out of warehouses. So kind of another way to think about it is, in the past, when people thought about picking in a warehouse, they might think about picking a case of water. But now, because of customer demands and how retail has changed, now we have to go and pick an individual bottle of water, as an example. And so the cost to either pick a bottle or pick a case, it's pretty similar, but there's going to be more and more eaches, more and more individual items being picked as e-commerce grows, as we continue to see changes in retail. So we believe that this opportunity is going to continue to grow, and there'll be more and more need for these types of technologies.
And just a slight explanation for people listening and myself. What is the difference between an autonomous mobile robot vehicle like yours and what they call automated guided vehicles, or AGVs? They've been established for quite some time. AGVs have been around for quite a long time. But these autonomous vehicles are different. But I wonder if you could explain what the main difference is.
That's a great question. I'd love to answer that. So kind of the two key words here are the word autonomous in AMR, and then guided in AGV. So with AGVs, an automated guided vehicle, the guided piece is key. And so that guidance is controlled and made possible by wires or stickers or magnets. There's something physical that's being used so that the vehicle can move around the location. And so that's very well established, very well known, mature types of technology. Like you could almost simplify it where like certain types of AGVs are almost like miniature trains moving around in a warehouse. Now, more recently, thanks to advances on both the hardware and software side, so there is coming to the market a new breed of AMRs, so autonomous mobile robots. And with AMRs, they do not use stickers or wires to move around, but an AMR will, particularly in our one, will have a map that it uses to navigate. And so that map has static physical objects in it, and then using sensors in the AMR, it can see changes in the map. So it can see dynamic objects such as people, forklifts, and even other static objects like a box, but which are outside of the map. And it's able to navigate around those objects in a very safe and efficient manner.
Right, and there are I wouldn't say a lot of companies offering this type of vehicle, even though AGVs have been around a long time. There's not that many companies that offer AGVs. So when I say not that many, you're not talking about a saturated market, I don't think. But beyond that, the autonomous generation of vehicles that you're offering, or you represent, again, there's not that many of those kind of companies, but there are, I would say, a significant number, and it's a fairly new market. The investment, it seems to be worthwhile or makes sense from an observer's point of view. What does it feel like to be competing in a market that is emerging, both in terms of from the customer point of view, but also developing in technology and in other ways? from a supplier point of view, supplier being your company, basically?
It's like such an exciting place to be right at this moment in time. And like for anybody listening to this who's like thinking about their next job, maybe thinking about what do I do with my life, what education do I need, like looking at supply chain technology, um, with the changes that are happening in the world, with more and more retail going to e-commerce, with um, omni-channel shopping, with the store footprint changing, that there's such opportunity here, and um, there's a lot of problems that need to be solved in the space. Then now is a great time as well. So we think about, for example, like hardware that's needed in robot technology. Over the last number of years, there's been a drop both in the price of sensors, but also in the size of sensors. So now you can get more sensors cheaper, and they take up a smaller footprint within an AMR. Thanks to advances in both open source and off-the-shelf software, it's like now much faster and easier than before to be able to go and prototype and build a robot, to be able to like create new libraries, create new capabilities for a robot. Like just kind of one example, when we set up this company, it would take, give or take, 5 months to write a obstacle avoidance library. But now, just with all the advances in software, that we're now able to do obstacle avoidance libraries in just a matter of hours or days. Also, like another huge component that's needed for in this space is around your processing power. Particularly like for our company, we use a lot of like cloud-based processing power. And like roughly over the past 10 years, like a teraflop has dropped in price from roughly $40, and now it's down into $40, and now it's down into the pennies for a teraflop. And so kind of just going back to like now is a wonderful time to be in this space. Like the technology has advanced so much, technology is affordable, and there's like enormous problems to go out and solve. And then like for us, with the problem that we're looking to solve, which is like the speed of picking in a warehouse, there is a tremendous product market fit for what we're doing. And we're a relatively young company, but we see, based on the number of warehouses that our technology is in, it's in 30 warehouses, and we've only been offering our product to the market for just over 2 years, that we're off to like a really good start here.
Right, and just on a quick sort of aside about the technology, does it use LiDAR? When you say mapping technologies, how does it get around? Does it use cameras like we understand cameras, or does it use some sort of laser-based system like LiDAR?
Yes, a lot of the AMRs use LiDAR, and our particular AMR, it actually uses LiDAR and a camera.
Right, and the cloud, the teraflops that you mentioned, that's a very interesting insight. Where does the computing take place? Does it take place on? I mean, it can't be on the on the device. And how does it? Where does it go? To the cloud? What service does it use? I mean, if you don't have to name them, but how does that part work?
Yeah, so there's two main areas of where like a tremendous amount of processing power takes place. So like one is on the robot itself. And so on the robot, you need a lot of processing for the movement, obstacle avoidance for safety. And like we use a GPU on our robot. Then in the cloud, we also have a tremendous amount of processing there for our artificial intelligence. And kind of one of the core areas of intellectual property that we run in the cloud is our AI that groups together like orders in a warehouse so that the walking for the operator, the picker in the warehouse, is reduced. And we, so like we're very big proponents and consumers of cloud computing power. So our customers, they do not have any servers running Six River Systems software within their own networks. So the Chuck, our robot, it just needs to get on a Wi-Fi network in a certain part of the warehouse when it's getting the work to do. So it needs to be on Wi-Fi so it can connect to our, we call it our global fulfillment network. So it needs to be on the Wi-Fi in the warehouse to connect to our cloud-based systems. And then once Chuck has its work, it can actually go to dead spots in the warehouse. And because it has a map on it, it's able to navigate around the warehouse, even in dead spots. So like in summary, Abdul, a lot of processing power on the robot for navigation, and then in the cloud to group together like orders.
Okay, interesting. Okay, what about the sales sectors, sectors that you're aiming at or targeting in terms of sales and supply? I mean, what's that like? I mean, you're a fairly new company, so you probably, I don't know how much you can say, but well, what are the sectors that you've approached and who are you working with, what are your partners, and which sectors are you targeting?
Yeah, so we see a tremendous amount of demand from third-party logistics companies. One of our third-party logistic customers is XPO Logistics, and they're using us in multiple warehouses. We also see a lot of demand from retailers. So an example of a retail customer of ours is Office Depot. And Office Depot use their trucks to do fulfillment both on direct to customer orders, so e-commerce orders, and also to replenish their physical stores. So a huge amount of demand there. We're also, we get inbound interest from B2B distributors, from companies who have a lot of service parts in their supply chain. So think about, like, for example, you could think about a big, huge piece of equipment like an airplane. But in an airplane, there's tens of thousands of small components. And so companies who are building airplanes and also maintaining airplanes or any other large piece of equipment like that, like we receive inbound interest from them to go and use our Chuck solution within their warehouses.
Yeah, that's a sort of mix I expected. I mean, it's easy to sort of try and ask loads of questions about this area, but e-commerce seems to be the one that a lot of people talk about. E-commerce meaning, online shopping aimed at consumers, consumer-oriented online shopping. Obviously, you or your partners probably don't necessarily directly supply the end customer. You do the work in the warehouse that needs to be done. But in terms of how consumer trends possibly, or other trends in terms of buying, in terms of e-commerce, how are they affecting the operation of the warehouse. You did touch on it earlier, I think, when you talked about individual items, the need for picking individual items increasing. I don't know if that was, connected to the trend of more online shopping and so on. But what are the trends in e-commerce that affect how how a warehouse is operated, if any?
Oh yeah, so one, the shift that from there's more of a need to pick um, eaches, individual items, rather than cases. Stores are shrinking. So in the past, you might have a big box store on the outskirts of a city, but now even for those big household, like well-known household name stores, they're starting to shrink their footprints, and they're even now putting stores into the middle of cities. And so in these mini stores, they're now getting replenished with eaches. So rather than having a case of water stored out the back, a van will come to that store every day or every second day, and whatever number of items had been sold during that period of time will be put directly back on the shelves. Our kind of one of our customers, just they see that they customer expectations have changed, like based on e-commerce buying experiences, and so now every company needs to be able to like deliver that high level of service. And it's not when operators are looking at their supply chain. In the past, they certainly were looking at it as one where how can we reduce the costs, but now your supply chain can be such a competitive differentiator, and they're viewing it like not only around cost containment, but also we need to invest in our supply chain for revenue containment, revenue protection, and even revenue growth. And then we see that trend like just continuing to go for many, many years to come.
Right, and in terms of implementing a solution like yours, let's talk about specifically yours. I don't think you can share specific numbers of how much a unit costs, a chuck costs, but what are the approximate returns on time to get return on investment? How expensive is it, and what size of operation would make it? I know you mentioned earlier about some of the use cases and when it would make sense, but any sort of indication as to what kind of return on the time? People talk about ROI and they understand what it is. It's sort of a certain amount of time before you get a return on the investment. So what's the ROI on Chuck or the system that you're offering?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the first answer is it depends on what you're starting from. So what we see is if you're starting from using a manual cart with paper pick tickets, that it's very easy to get double or triple productivity with a collaborative robot. Now, if you, for example, have a cart and you're using a headset, so for voice directed picking today, then you're starting in a better position, but there's still a lot of walking because there's a manual cart. So by introducing Chuck into an operation where you're picking with voice, our customers see an additional 50, 60, 70% improvement in pick rates there. So it really depends on the starting point. Then in terms of what the buyers are looking for when they run through their economic models, in the past they were used to thinking about warehouse investments with a 10-year payback. But the world has changed, and now CFOs and companies, they're not as willing to make those investments that require such a long period to pay back. So we're seeing our buyers are looking for their investments to show a return in 12 to 18 months.
Right, and lastly, warehouses traditionally, they tended to always, you always imagined a conveyor going through the warehouse, conveyor system with maybe hundreds of meters or even thousands of meters of track fixed to the ground. And it's an interesting point that some people I've interviewed have made, that there now warehouse managers have the choice of whether to install a conveyor or these autonomous guided vehicle, autonomous mobile robots and AGVs possibly, which means they won't have a lot of fixed infrastructure. It can be more flexible and so on. What's your perspective and perhaps experience in terms of discussions around this topic?
Yeah, so I am like lucky that I get to travel around the US and Europe to conferences, to go visit clients, to go visit customers. And a common thread that I hear over and over again from people who run warehouses is, I'm never bolting anything into the ground again. And the reason for that is, when you bolt something into the ground, like, you've got a very fixed piece of infrastructure. But in today's world, things, they just change all the time. And so if something is bolted into the ground, and now if your business changes, you're stuck with what you bolted into the ground. And like, in some cases, you might be forced to change your business to be able to work in the environment that you have. Also, like, when you bolt steel and motors into the ground, like, from day one, that type of infrastructure, it just starts to degrade. It starts to rust. The best rates you're going to get from it is when the system is brand new. Now, if you look at AMRs, so a flexible, a mobile form of automation that's powered by software, with an AMR, it actually gets better over time. And it gets better over time by the advances in software. If you have a cloud-based infrastructure like we have, you can apply learnings from one customer and roll that across to the entire customer base. So over time, with AI advances, your robot can move faster, it can move smoother, it can be more efficient, it can have a better pick path, which will, like, improve your throughput, improve your pick rates, just from software updates. So it's the only form of material, an AMR is the only form of material handling equipment that I'm aware of that actually can get better over time.
Okay, thank you.
Send us an email at sales@roboticsandautomationnews.com to register for one of our many upcoming webinars. And if you'd like us to host your webinar, we have a range of options, including long-term lead generation packages and marketing campaigns. We look forward to hearing from you soon.